Elmore and Officer Brailsford. They had their weapons in a ready position. I had my rifle slung, and Officer Doan had his taser.
Okay, so the other two officers did not have any weapons out, and yours was not drawn or pointed at the room, towards the room? No,
ma'am.
All right, so you only had the two AR-15s pointed down the hallway, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then you testified a little bit ago that the female walked out first, and then the male came out right after her, correct?
Yes, very quickly.
Okay. And since you don't know exactly what Officer Cochran said to them, he could have said, the way he phrased it is the woman comes out first and the male comes out second?
No, he told me, he told the female to come out first.
Okay. And that's what happened, right? She appeared first?
Yeah.
And then the male appeared second?
Was not expecting or thinking or planning that the male would come out almost at the same time as the female, if that's the answer to it.
But he didn't walk out hand in hand with her, right?
No.
They didn't walk out like together, step by step. He was actually right behind her.
Yes, by maybe a tenth of a second.
Okay. And when they came out, you screamed at them to stop, right?
Right.
You said it really loud, stop, down on the ground. And then you said to them, if you make another mistake, you're going to be shot. Sergeant, what was the first mistake that they made?
I didn't want them to come out together like that. Instead of dealing with one person at a time and being able to slow it down, instead now I'm dealing with multiple people in the hallway, and I don't know what's left behind in the room.
Right.
And who's left behind in the room.
Okay. So you were threatening to have them both shot.
No.
Hold on.
Oh,
I'm not finished with my question. Okay. Because they came out one after the other. So the next wrong thing they made, right, that you perceived was a mistake, could have gotten them shot, correct?
I'm not sure if I quite get it, but I'll try to answer as best I can. What my idea and intent at the time is to warn them, right, that if you did something that could be perceived as a threat, that they could be shot.
But then you did not say that.
No, ma'am, I don't recall my exact verbiage. I don't.
Okay. Even though you watched the tape, did you get a chance to read the transcript of the Axon body video?
I think I sketched through it one time. I think is it towards the bottom of the report?
I don't know. Did you review it though, or did you just peruse through it real quick?
I perused through that.
Okay, that's fine. In this, let me just do this right here. You said to the two individuals, if you make a mistake, another mistake, there's a very severe possibility that you're both going to get shot. Do you understand?
Yes.
And so the first mistake was that they came out too close together, correct?
Together, period.
And so any other mistake that you were going to decide what the mistake was going to get them shot?
No.
That's what you said. There's a very severe possibility you're going to get shot.
Possibility existed. It didn't say we are.
Oh, you want me to show you where it says there's a very severe possibility?
Possibility, ma'am.
Okay. And when Mr. Shaber tried to ask you a question, you said, shut up. I'm not here to be tactful and diplomatic with you. You listen, you obey. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and so you expected him to obey every command that you gave him, right?
I expect him at least to try.
That's not what you told him. What you told him was, I expect you to listen and obey. You didn't say, I expect you to try to obey, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that at this point you're a bit angry with Mr. Shaber?
No.
No? And you watched this tape, right? I mean, you listened to your voice on the tape. And you wouldn't describe that as being angry when you tell someone to shut up really loud? I'm not here to be tactful and diplomatic with you. You were not upset.
Well, ma'am, I didn't want to necessarily have a extended conversation with him. In direct answer to your question, no, I was not angry with him.
Okay. And from what you told defense counsel, that any movement that would have been made under this situation would be perceived as a threat, correct?
Yes, and what I was concerned about was motions specifically for a weapon.
Okay. And what you also said during direct examination is when they came out and you told them to prone out on the floor, they both cooperated. Is that true?
Yes, they did.
So Mr. Shaver and Ms. Portillo, that was the female's name, they were cooperative when they understood what was being asked of them.
Correct.
And again, at this time, Mr. Shaver, as he's out there, and the female, there were no questions about are there weapons in the room, because now they're outside the room. I know you asked if there was another person there, but they're not told why they were being detained, right? What you were there for, correct? Or if there were other weapons or any kind of weapons in the room, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when you said earlier that Mr. Shaver was not in custody, right? But Mr. Shaver had 2 or 3 weapons pointed at him, correct?
2.
2 for sure, the AR-15s. So was he free to leave?
No.
Right. And in your training and experience, does that make a person in custody?
Yes.
Okay. So he was in custody. He doesn't know why. Nobody tells him why he's coming out of the room. Nobody says, hey, we're evacuating, or, you know, there's danger to you, of you, anything like that, correct? Because you don't know what Officer Cochran said.
Correct.
And he doesn't say any of that in his report.
Yes,
His
sir.
report, he claims that all he said was, you need to come out, and is there a female in there? And the female comes out first. Correct?
Yes.
All right. And there were other less lethal forms available, right? That's Officer Doan. We'll call him the less lethal officer, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he had a camera on his body.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And at one point, did he not change from a gun, that his gun was out, to a taser?
I do not know.
All right. If he put that in his report, would you have any reason to dispute that? Or would you have any reason to dispute it if that's what he says, since it happened to him?
It in itself would not be unusual. An officer, depending on how they would fill into an assignment, may transition from one to the other.
All right. And really, officers, when they're at a situation like this, they sort of use their own judgment, correct? They're not robots or anything, just following orders, right?
Yes.
So if they felt that the situation had de-escalated, they can kind of lower the level of lethal involvement they wish to engage in, let's say, correct?
Or yes, that is a possibility, or they decide they need to fill into another assignment.
Exactly. Or it could go the other way, right? You could start less lethal, and then when the situation gets iffy, you can move up to lethal, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that was an option open to these officers.
Yes.
Depending on their own point of view of the perceived threat, correct?
And where the positioning was.
Sure. And you know, as you know from people, much less officers, somebody can perceive a threat where another person does not, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I forgot who the arresting officer, who was the officer who handcuffed Ms. Portillo?
It would have been Officer Gomez and Officer Cochran.
There were 2 of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So which officer stepped in front of the other officer's AR-15 in the line of sight there? I don't remember.
That was Officer Gomez.
Okay. And so he ended up with his back to Mr. Shaver, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he was the one who was he the one who said she was secure when you asked?
I honestly do not recall, because I hear the voice behind me.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was either, but
It may have been Officer Cochran.
okay. So whichever officer it was, let's just say that, when he said she was secure, what did you say to him?
I do not recall.
And actually what you said to him was, no, she's not secure, and you...
Oh, I'm sorry, I can explain that, and I understand. What I was talking about was cuffing them, but when they are brought through, I also want to make sure they've been frisked. So just in itself being handcuffed doesn't mean that they're secure. It's kind of a sergeant thing. I want to make sure that if I'm being communicated that they've also been checked for a weapon.
Okay. So even in this active, scary, threatening situation, you made sure to tell him, a bit of a reprimand, she is not secure. You need to pat her down, and then she's secure, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good teaching opportunity, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I said it was a good teaching opportunity in a sense. You know, you were telling him, hey, she's not secure until she's been patted down.
If I can answer in two senses. In one sense, you're actually right, but it wasn't really at that point a teaching opportunity like that was something you would bring up later in a debrief. Sure. Yes, I want to affirm that to bring it up, but also at the same time, it is a very practical matter. Make sure you don't have somebody that could potentially have a weapon still behind you, even though they're in handcuffs. Right, right.
Like you didn't, instead of saying, I mean, you chose not to say, get out of the way, right? Instead, you said, hey, is she secure? No, she's not. You need to pat her down, right? Because he kind of got in the way of the shot, right?
Officer Gomez, in answer to that, and please correct me if I don't understand this correctly. When he went behind the female undercover, I know that I said something to him at the time. I believe I called him to pull her. You know, we would actually not go behind her, go past the frontal coverage and turn her back. You would actually, is two officers, one each side, would grab a hand or a wrist, secure them that way so they can't move their hands, and then cuff them.
Okay.
Did that answer the question, ma'am, for you?
Kind of. Okay. You also said that when Mr. Shaver was, when he put both of his hands behind his back, right, that you were thinking maybe he was going for a gun?
There's a possibility, or he just wasn't tracking.
Right. I think you did say maybe he wasn't.
That comes back to what you mentioned to me before. You know, yes, I was trying to not have this totally rigid sense of intolerance, but at that point we had distance. That's one of the reasons I said some of the things I said to him, right. And he did seem at that point to
be a little confused, maybe.
No, he did seem to start tracking, because as I remember, I did start asking things. Do you understand? You know what I'm saying? And he was responding to me.
Okay. So when he put his hands, both of his hands behind his back from that far away, he was not shot, correct?
Correct.
Even though he made a mistake, because you didn't want him to do that, right?
Correct.
You did not fire. Nobody fired at him. So not very likely that anybody thought he was reaching for a weapon with both hands from that far away when he was still a little iffy about what was going on, right?
It was iffy.
Okay. And so so he's doing some things correctly as you want him to, and some things he's not. Is it possible that he was a little confused?
I do not know what his state of mind was. I mean, honestly,
sure. No,
I have thought about it quite a bit, and I have to be very sincere. I do not know what was going on in his state of mind.
Right, and you also don't know what was going on with Mr. Brailsford's head, inside of his head, because we can't read people's minds, correct?
That is correct.
Right, so you don't know what was going on in any of the officers' head. You only know how they react or what they say, correct?
Yes.
You can't read, obviously, what's going on in their heads at any point. Correct? All right. So, when Mr. Shaver puts his hand behind his back and he puts his head down, to you, that's not a position you have seen people who are going to be arrested get in?
I can understand the point of that, and the thing that I don't know why he would do that. They didn't follow the instructions, and he just had the female follow pretty much the same set of instructions immediately before that. So it wasn't following the pattern that he'd already been given.
Oh, okay.
And then when he did that and he put both hands, I was like, why? And as I recall, that's why I gave some of the very forceful commands that I did was, I don't want that. You know, I want you to keep your hands out where I can see.
Sure, yeah, and you did. But as you were watching him, did you see him looking over there and staring at her, or was it was his face not on the ground as you told him to put his face down?
I do not recall which direction his face was.
So that, okay, let's say
When he
this.
was sitting up, ma'am? When he put both hands behind his back?
When he was down on the ground, because you had him prone, is when you were dealing with her.
Correct.
He was not allowed to sit up or look up at that point.
Oh, I understand. And
Remember
what
what I
I think what I'm referring to is I was trying to give the same sort of verbal commands.
Okay. So she wasn't really a role model in the sense that he could see her. He would have only been listening maybe to what
Yes.
she was being told. All right. Now, would it be fair to say that someone in his situation would have been scared if he
Yes.
walked around the corner and saw, a lot of officers, two of them pointing big rifles at him?
Yes.
All right. So does confusion with a little bit of intoxication or fear with some intoxication make a person a little, confused, not completely being able to pay attention or track, as you called it?
I have had people, even though they've been scared and intoxicated, follow the commands without an issue. I've had others that have actually just stopped what they're doing, and we've watched them think through it and then follow the commands. So, and directly your question is, once again, I do not know what's going on in his state of mind. It was different.
Okay. You also said that when Mr. Shaver comes up at the end there before he was shot, or actually, let me take that back for one more point there. But you said that during direct, right, that him not following the instructions you were given to him, you said he may have made a mistake, correct?
Are you talking about when he put his hands behind his back?
At any point, could those have been mistakes?
Yes.
Okay. So not always did you perceive a movement like that as being necessarily dangerous. Otherwise, he would have been shot much earlier, right?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay. When Daniel, for the last time, when he made the move, right, with his right hand, you said he put his hand behind him like drawing a weapon.
You're talking about the...
I'm in a different area now.
I believe it was the third time he put his hands behind his back?
Right before he was
The last time? Okay. Are you talking about... And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm
But he only put his hand behind his back twice that was mentioned, right? Once was when he put both of his hands.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm not misunderstanding, what you're asking me. If you're referring
Did
to...
not finish a question, though.
I apologize.
Let's hold on for that. So the last time, right, he put his hand, just right before he was shot, he was on his hands and knees, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, and he was crawling towards you as ordered?
Yes.
Okay, so by then he is following instructions, right?
Yes.
By then he'd already cried, he was crying, right?
Yes.
And he had twice said, please don't shoot, and then don't shoot me.
I remember at least once he said that, yes.
Okay. And by the way, none of that is in your report, right? About him crying or begging not to be shot. Okay. So then he still has his left hand on the ground. His head is down, right?
Yes.
And he, jerks up a little bit, and he's reaching towards his waistband, right? Towards the back. Do you think of any other reason why he might have been doing that movement?
At that time, and even now, no. To me, it was a classic draw stroke for a weapon that was in the rear.
All right.
And if I can explain why.
Nope.
For many years.
You may not explain why.
Sorry.
I want to move on with that thought to this. Did you notice that his very loose basketball shorts were coming down slowly as he was crawling?
I was not paying any attention to his shorts, ma'am.
That's fine. You were watching his hands or not?
Watching his hands, watching his movements, right.
Would it be fair to say then that these officers that are focused on this individual, Mr. Shaver, are watching his hands?
Yes.
But, it makes more sense than watching his feet, let's say, right? Because the only way they're going to be in real danger would be if he could use his hands to harm them, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So 6 people are focused on this man's hands, correct? Right. And the thought in your head was, the only thought was gun, gun, gun. That's what you said a little bit ago, correct? No. That you were going to get shot.
Yes.
Okay. And the rifle was in your right hand, but it was still slung on your shoulder, is that right, or no?
Yes, I had a 2-point sling, so when the rifle was slung, it would have been toward
In front of you?
pointed down, yes.
Okay. And so, in order to make the shot, you were thinking to yourself, right? In order to make the shot, you would have had to pull up that weapon past or over back then, Officer Brailsford's head, correct? In order to avoid shooting him. That's what you said earlier, right?
Yes, I would have had to bring it up, put the muzzle forward, and actually lean forward.
Okay. So you would have had to do all of that, right? That was all going through your mind, right? In the split second that it took for Officer Brailsford to shoot Mr. Shaver. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I remember thumb on the selector switch, I started yelling, and I started lifting, and what I'm trying to is describe what is kind of a program muscle movement.
Sure. So even though Mr. Shaver was not listening to everything you were saying and doing it word for word, you never pointed the gun at him, correct?
No, it's not my function.
All right. And you did not, up until the point that he was shot, you were not one of the shooters, correct?
No.
And none of the other officers fired any shots, not even the taser did not go off, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Even the ones who had their weapons pointed at Mr. Shaver.
That simply could have been because of the angle and how quickly they perceived.
This approach?
Oh, sorry.
All right, we are going to take our evening recess. We'll resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Sergeant Langley, I'll ask you to be back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow, unless otherwise instructed by counsel. Anything else for today from the state? From the defense?
Oh, John, could we approach one real quick?
On or off?
Off, just a question.